Hello, everybody, and welcome today. Very excited today to have Dorian Gonsalves of Belvoir here. How are you, Dorian?
Hello, Simon. How you doing? Hopefully you can hear me. I'm not on
Got your
mute or
side?
anything. No, got it.
Yeah,
Simon,
you're all
good
Jerry
to see you.
Maguired up. You're looking good, looking relaxed. I like that. Dorian, thank you very much for joining us. This is part of our series, kind of getting to know you for some of the key industry influencers within the industry. And I'm obviously in your role as CEO of Belvoir, obviously, there's an incredible amount of influence and sway that you have. And I'm really keen to get to kind of what drives you as an individual and sort of what's happened over the course of the career, and obviously throwing a few sort of curveballs in terms as well about the industry itself. Could we just spend a little bit of time just on that background, if it's okay with you? Because I think you've been, what do they call them? The Generation Z people. They barely stay anywhere for a couple of years. Well, that certainly can't be thrown at you, can it? You've been a two-company man, from what I understand.
I thought you were going to call me an antique, actually, Simon. I am, even though I'm not, I don't think I'm particularly old. I'm not young anymore. I'm certainly not that old. But yeah, it feels like I've been around for God knows how long. I think it's about 20 odd years in property altogether.
Yeah.
But just as you rightly say, two companies, Countrywide first of all, back in the old Harry Hill, Jerry Fitzjohn days.
Yeah.
Which I must say I really enjoyed. I love the training element of Countrywide, and I love the equality. Is equality the right word for it? Where you could join Countrywide, didn't matter whether you were tall, short, black, white, thin, male, female, whatever. You had access to great training and you could learn a craft. And so I learned the craft of estate agency, if you like, at Countrywide first of all. And yeah, I'm one of those people who really enjoyed it. I stayed there for 6 to 7 years in total,
Okay.
and left pretty much only because I'd got to a point in my career with Countrywide. I just wanted something new and exciting, and I bumped into Mike and Steph Goddard, who at the time had founded Belvoir. We were much smaller at the time. We had 40 or 50 offices when I joined. We've now got sort of 400, and we're a much bigger business. And it's been it's been such a journey. I think maybe like you, Simon, every year just seems to trip by now. It gets faster and faster. Whether that's because I'm getting old, or whether that's
it's a bit
I'm
worrying.
not sure whether that's age or whether it's career choice or whatever. But it's such a fast-paced sector that there's never a dull moment, and I still love it. I still love everything about everything I do.
So that meritocracy kind of element that you're talking about there as well. So yeah, you get given all the tools of the training, but the ability then to, or certainly way back then, to you could aspire to climb up the ranks was something that really you thought really worked within that model of the of Countrywide as it was in those days.
It certainly did, and when I sort of think back to their recruitment process, which I went through, and I joined as a sort of green estate agent right at the bottom as a trainee negotiator. And I remember sort of being set targets, and when you get to that target after 6 months, you get a company car, a whole Ford Fiesta they give you on lease, to get you around so you can do your viewings. But actually, those little goals that you were set, whether it's 6 months or 12 months, just taught me the good practice of goal setting, putting realistic goals in place, and the feeling of achievement that employees can get when they achieve these goals. And Countrywide was brilliant about sort of goal setting and the whole sort of training framework. There are a lot of bad points about corporates. I think we've seen that unfold over the last few years. Their inflexibility, I think, is one of them. But actually, the framework element is one of their strengths, but the framework can also be one of their weaknesses, at the same time.
Do you think that's what has happened there? I mean, we don't want to obviously go, but do you think that element is it was that lack of ability to adapt and everything else? Because at the time that some of the corporates have been having a tough time, maybe under the threat of kind of the onliners, clearly the franchise arm of the industry has just seemingly gone from strength to strength, hasn't it?
It has, and you may remember that Countrywide sold off their franchise arm.
Yeah.
If memory serves, now I'm scratching my head. That was sort of, was it May time 2011? It was sort of mid 2011 when it was carved out. It was under the Best Eves banner at the time, and I'd sort of watched that, being in franchising. I'd watched that business grow pretty well, sort of in the previous few years. But I think the franchise division took quite a hard hit during the credit crunch, and as they came out of that, then they decided to sell it off and just concentrate on the sort of core business. But I think really they were caught in a perfect storm, and I'm not convinced that storm has gone yet. And the perfect storm being low fees, so agents offering pretty cheap fees at one end of a state agency, and also lettings, but to a lesser extent.
Yeah.
Transaction volumes haven't increased over the last 5 or 6 years. In fact, they haven't increased to the sort of height, pre-credit crunch height.
Yeah.
So fewer transactions, lower fees, and due to the sort of large framework, very heavy costs. We've got a branch network, but ultimately a franchisee is only responsible for the costs of that branch. They're not responsible for the costs of area managers, regional directors, everything that goes with it. So it's high costs, lack of agility. I think it's just a perfect storm, in that environment. Yet if you look at other countries, you can charge a much higher fee for doing the same job.
Yeah. And I mean, I know Australia, when we opened over there, probably quite well, obviously, and the level of franchise ownership over there is clearly much higher than it is over here, as are obviously the fee levels. Do you think we are heading in that? I'm not talking about in terms of the fees, but in terms of the franchise, is the trend towards increased franchising here to stay? Do you think, or for the foreseeable?
That's a good old question, that one is, Simon, because I think, if you look at the debates that rage in the sort of sector, and, if the debate is a corporate with very heavy costs and very heavy expensive shops and expensive staffing structures, and with a clear requirement to have to charge high fees, if that model isn't working very well at the moment, and that's at one end of the sort of scale. If at the other end of the scale, it's sort of a home run type business, maybe with cheaper fees, but certainly with lower overheads, no staff, sort of, your self-employed person working at home, I'd say actually franchising fits squarely in the middle.
Yeah.
So we're still very pro shops. My view has always been that most shops now are actually quite cost effective. Rents have come down.
Yeah.
You don't need to be in a primary location, and there's a question mark over what is primary anymore, with a lot of the bigger retailers moving out of town centres. So you can be in a pretty good secondary location. The rents aren't particularly expensive. You've got to pay for a shop fit, given that's quite expensive, up front, but it should last you for, sort of at least 5 to 10 years. But ultimately, it's about credibility, isn't it? Clients want to trade with an agent who is credible, and part of that judgment that the client is making, premises plays a part in that. Now, if you haven't got a shop, you'd argue it doesn't play any part. If you have got a shop, you'd argue that it plays a huge part. But I think, as a consumer personally, when I'm looking at a business and deciding who to trade with, I'm looking at reviews, I'm looking at shops, I'm looking at whether they answer the telephone quickly, whether the people are nice to me and responsive and knowledgeable. So, a shop forms part of the overall package. But, I see it as a very strong marketing tool. So we're still very pro-shop. And in addition to that, 80% or higher than 80% of our franchisees turn over more than 100,000 a year. So it's quite a high value franchise in terms of turnover.
Yeah.
If you're turning over, and so bear in mind, 80% are turning over at least £100,000. If you want to turn over 100k, you've probably got to have at least one staff member, maybe two staff members. And if you're planning for growth, you've got to have a team in place that can handle that growth as you invest in marketing or acquisitions or whatever it might be. And of course, if you've got staff on board, you've got to have somewhere for those people to sit. I can't really imagine a scenario where you're running a successful home run business where you're all sitting in cars and sort of getting together. And you've got to have somewhere to sit and somewhere to meet clients, even though you can do a lot of it digitally. Just in our sector, you've got to meet with people, and people have got to have somewhere to sit. So therefore, if you're going to have an office, why not have a sign above the door and use it as a marketing tool? Hey ho, that's a shop. That's it. So, and we are seeing, from what I've seen in one or two other franchise models, when the home run businesses become successful, then they're moving into premises.
That's very true,
So,
isn't it? So that's still a natural evolution. So pointing towards as you grow and get more successful, clearly you're going to want to benefit from the teams being able to get together. Because I think one thing that's clear to me, and actually it's become clear over the course of this lockdown period, is it's actually not that hard for somebody who's experienced to almost up sticks, go home, can't continue working. But where's the training and development of the staff below that? You learn by watching and hearing and listening, don't you? And if you're new to the game or relatively new, how are you ever going to pick up those skills as effectively as you could do in the old days? Not to use a pejorative term there, but it's difficult, nigh on impossible, isn't it?
It is definitely so. That was my point about sort of franchising sits in between the sort of the corporate model, if you like, and the sort of one-man band working from home. And actually, then that's one part of it. And then your question about sort of Australia and franchising being more popular. I mean, I remember sort of 15 years ago, Simon, where people just didn't understand franchising, and this wasn't just with our brand, it was with all of the franchise brands. I actually think it was frowned upon, I think, in the sector. I think franchising was always classed as, well, it's not a corporate and it's not an independent. So what is it? And I think people struggle to understand where we fitted in and where our future was sort of going. But that's changed absolutely since I think we listed on AIM and other companies have listed on AIM too. And I just think as franchising has become much more successful in the sector. I mean, if you look at a lot of the successful estate agency and lettings groups now, they are franchise groups, and every single year they're getting stronger. They're not cutting swathes of offices and closing down, because that's not how the model is built. The model isn't built around carrying corporate costs. So, as I said earlier, the franchisee carries their own costs and benefits from the profit from that unit. The profit doesn't feed up to the franchisor. Franchise models are built around royalties, a percentage of sort of turnover. So, typically the franchisee will take the lion's share. The franchisor takes a smaller share, and we use that smaller share to run our business. The larger share goes towards running the branch at sort of branch level. So it's one of those, very unusual arrangement. Actually, the franchise arrangement is, and what I've seen in the UK over the last 10 years is that.
I've just lost your. I just lost the. No worries.
Am I on?
Yeah, got you. Sorry,
Right.
just lost you in that last bit.
That's all right. That was my fault. That was my battery going on my headset.
Not a problem. Not a problem at all.
After a long day.
Yes,
so we got to.
So I think
It's all right.
So what I was just going to say, where we were up to in terms of you were talking about, what I was going to just ask you there, Dorian, is you must take tremendous pride though, actually, in that, I remember going back that franchising, not just in this sector but in general, was viewed a bit quizzically. So do you take some comfort that actually you have been responsible, as well as yourselves, for making this now a perfectly acceptable and positive thing?
Yes, absolutely. It's not it's not down to me as an individual necessarily, Simon. There are some brilliant people in franchising, in property franchising, in all of the franchise companies. And then, of course, you've got franchisees who, they do the real work. It's all, that they deal with the clients at sort of ground level. And I just think there are fabulous people in franchising in general. And the reason for that, I think, comes down to skin in the game. Yeah. So anybody involved in franchising, you run your own business, you've got 100% skin in the game. Yeah. It's mega important to you. If somebody works for you and they have no skin in the game, it's obviously less important to them. But with the franchisee and franchisor relationship, we've all got skin in the game, and the success of the business, the reputation of franchising in the future is just really important for us. And I think, and as it's so important, everybody wants to fight for the success of the business. So I'm not saying that everybody is thinking the same way and everyone wants to go in the same direction, because that's just, when you get 100 humans in a room, you've probably got 100 different directions. But if you're lucky, you'll get the majority going in sort of one direction. That's
but the important thing is the structure reinforces, doesn't it, that direction, that trend towards it. If you're taking time off or not putting in enough effort, well, you're only fooling yourself, aren't you? Ultimately, at the end of the day, within a franchise operation.
Definitely, and I think what we shouldn't forget is that people buy a franchise for lots of different reasons, and when I see the industry sort of debates raging about what's better, is it corporate, is it franchise, is it sort of self-employed, I think what we should remember is that people run a business for different reasons. So some people are raging capitalists and they're just running it to make as much money as they can, within the shortest time period possible. That's fine.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, you've got people who want to buy a business because they want to spend more time with their partner. Therefore, their partner comes into the business with them. I'm not sure that's a good thing in every sort of scenario, but their sort of partners working their life.
But to have that flexibility is the key, isn't it?
But they've absolutely, they've got the option. And then other people I talk to just want to get away from a succession of bad bosses. We're not the boss of a franchisee. They are their own boss. We just provide system, brand, framework, and a sort of collective way of working, community, if you like, that helps the franchisee to win business, because they've got the credibility of the brand, and also the financial backing and the operational backing of a franchisor. When acquisitions are a good example. So, consolidation is happening in the sector and has been happening for the last few years. And I must admit, it's happening far slower than I think it probably should be happening.
Well, even in the light of all the ones going on recently, you think that's going to, so you don't see this slowing again now? If anything, you can see it just continuing at the same pace.
I actually think it will increase in pace, but I'm not sort of sold on the fact that the corporates or the franchise models will be the go-to model of choice. I think it's a big old sector. I think that there's room in this industry for all of these different models, and clearly some at different points in time will outperform the others. Yeah. But business can be very cyclical as well. One sector doesn't perform well 1 year or for 5 years, then suddenly they reinvent themselves and they start performing well. Such is the circle of business. But to me, franchising is a brilliant model, whether it's a McDonald's franchise or whether it's a Domino's or whether it's a Belvoir franchise or a Northwood or a Newton Fallowell. The concept of franchising is a brilliant one, and you can tell I'm massively passionate about franchising because I think it works.
It's always come across, Dorian, and so you that kind of what it meant to you. Talk about how your views changed over. So you moved into Belvoir and you became the sales director quite quickly, didn't you? And then you took over the MD CEO role. When was that? About what time?
I have to scratch my head now. So it was 2005 when I joined, 2006 sales director.
Yep.
We had a great run up until sort of credit crunch, which hit all of us at the time. And we really grew the business during that period. And then during the credit crunch, we prepared the business to list on AIM. Yep. So the reason for listing on AIM wasn't just about making pots of cash. Bear in mind, I wasn't the founder, so I didn't have I didn't own a part of the business at that point.
Yep.
But listing on AIM was partially about helping the Goddards to exit, which they have over a long period of time.
Yeah.
As every founder wants to exit a business, it was just one route of doing that, one way to do that. But it's also about future growth. If you're on AIM, you can go to the market and raise money to do stuff, which we have a number of times. And also it's about credibility. If you're a PLC, you've got to declare everything, Simon, the colour of your socks, what hat you wear. You used to have to declare everything to everybody, and you have to be audited, etc. And that level of accountability, I think, is really, and transparency is just a healthy way of operating. So we listed in 2012. We went back to the market and raised about £5 million to help franchisees grow, which we did in the early days, and that worked well for us. That 5 million we used to help franchisees buy acquisitions, so to acquire their competitors.
And that's a massively important element of what you're about, isn't it? I mean, not just in terms of obviously helping the franchisees with expertise, access to funds and everything else, but of course, you know, as you highlighted before, percentage of the profitability comes from the growth. So it's in everyone's interest to obviously make that happen, isn't it? Where, as I would imagine, so many people were looking to get out of the game as well.
No, it is, especially on the lettings side. So we've come from a lettings background, so we are lettings people who sort of expanded into estate agency. So definitely on the lettings side, we don't tend to go out and sort of look for estate agency businesses, particularly unless they've got a proportion of lettings in there. And yeah, I mean, the acquisitions, we've done about 100 of them in the last 5 years.
Wow.
Excludes deals that I've done, you know, with businesses like Newton Fallowell or Northwood. So that's franchisee acquisitions, and that excludes the resale of franchisees. So when someone decides to sell the franchise, they can put it on the market, sell it, and a new franchisee comes on board. We tend to do 10 or 15 of those each year as well. So we've done a lot of business transfers. And I think that, you know, it is the circle of life, isn't it? You know, an independent agent gets to a point, they're 70 years old, they want to retire, they cash the business in, and you know, we've got a ready-made sort of pot of, well, quite a large pot of buyers ready to buy these businesses. So it's just a healthy.
Do you think that, you know, you mentioned earlier, you think the level of M&A activity is going to increase? There does seem to have been a disparity, though, with the level of business owners, well, by definition, getting older, but staying in the game for longer as well, haven't they? Do you think that what we're going to be witnessing now is people finally exiting? Is that one of the dynamics?
You know, I think that, I mean, I think it's very healthy that people can exit and they can sell their business for a million. And when you look at the sort of the home run type businesses, which are, you know, they're sort of a mix between job and franchise and sort of self-employment. But I think a lot of these models aren't built around an exit. And what I mean is, you know, if you're self-employed and you're working from home and you've got a small business turning over 20 or 30,000 a year, or 40,000 or 50,000, that's not worth a great deal when you want to exit. And at some point, you're going to want to finish, you're going to get fed up, you're going to want to retire, you might want to do something new. And wouldn't you prefer to be able to sell the business you've been working in for an amount of money to enable you to go and do something else, rather than just walking away and having nothing?
Yeah.
I think one of the, because that's how employment works. Normally, you don't own a share of the company that you work for. So if you walk away, you get nothing.
That's right.
It's a home run business and it's really small. It's probably worth nothing. So the sort of the middle area where you've got privately owned firms, either franchise or non-franchise, these businesses are worth something. And in some cases, they're worth millions and millions of pounds. Mm-hmm. So our model is geared around an exit as well, Simon, if that makes sense. So when people join us, they spend years working in their franchise. They're bolt-on acquisitions if they're minded to, but then when they want to exit, they can then sell that business for a much higher value compared with when they join that business. And that actually is one of the key areas that business people just tend not to think about. You know, we all think about doing well, earning a few quid this year and next year, but you tend not to think about what's going to happen in 5 or 10 years.
And that's fascinating, isn't it? Because talking to people like Adam Walker, though, you know, the business transfer specialist, he will talk very in, you know, quite detailed fashion about just how much work needs to go into really, you know, getting your business ready for exit, because otherwise you aren't going to really get the multiplier you want if it's a bit slapdash. So, you know, I think that is quite an important element there, isn't it? The understanding, look, the end game, as you said, is, you know, why not have that in sight? It doesn't mean to say that there's anything negative about that, is it? Quite the contrary. It's a lot of the time it's actually about making sure that the business could operate without you, which isn't a bad thing to have anyway in any business, is it?
Definitely, and you know, Adam's a really experienced guy. And you know, when you're running a business, you don't want to be paying the tax man. You know, you want to run your business and sort of be efficient in terms of how much tax you pay, etc. But when you sell a business, it's all about your declared profits and how profitable you are, because the buyer has then probably got to borrow money and then show the bank that they can pay this money back over a period of time, and you can only pay that money back if the business is making money. So you know, Adam's spot on that. Actually, if you're looking to sell a business, you probably need to prepare maybe 2 years ahead of that particular sale. So listed on AIM in 2012. We've been working on that since 2010. So it was 2010 I became MD. Stayed MD until 2014, stood down for a brief period, and then became MD or CEO again in 2017. Yeah, MD and CEO to me are the same thing. I have this debate with people.
Thank God you say that. I've never understood the difference, to be honest. I mean, famously, my degree of detail and depth is legendary low, but I've never really got it. It just seems to be the flip of a coin how somebody defines themselves as one or the other.
Do you know, it was more fashionable. I think it was more fashionable when we listed. I actually prefer MD because, you know, if you're a managing director, is probably more reflective of actually what we do in these businesses. You know, we are there managing the business, working. You know, we work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, whatever times you work, well, a lot longer than that. And it is more reflective. I think CEO is very Americanized, but when we listed, we were advised to switch from MD to CEO because it was more suitable for a PLC. That was all. But I see businesses starting at, you know, one-man bands where they call themselves CEO, and it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, there's
it works for you.
Well, look, I'm Chief Kerfuffle, so I'm not really sticking with the normal ones. So you've gone through a tremendous amount of change, and how has, if you were to try and look back on it, how has the business changed? You know, under your stewardship, what would you, as you said, actually, when you joined it, did you say it was about 50 offices? I mean, what are you now? You're about if I remember right from the research, you're about 390 offices, is it? Is that right?
It is there or thereabouts. So about 400 offices, and that includes sort of mortgages. I mean, I think that apart from the size, so we are, I don't know, 10 times bigger, let's say.
Yeah.
So, but size apart, I actually think the biggest change was moving out of our pigeonhole of being a letting specialist. And, you know, you've been around for however many years, you may remember that our strap line used to be Belvoir, the letting specialist.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. And that's quite,
that's
hard then, isn't it, to say, so it's a bit like Moneypenny used to do, we answer calls and that's all we do, and then they launch a chat service and you have to pivot, don't you? So sometimes you can get a little bit caught out by what you start with, but that's how we often do. Because I think it's totally logical though, isn't it, Dorian? Quite often you start off in a niche and specialise in a niche, and then as you have the capability to grow, then you do so as you see fit.
You know, definitely, and so the pigeonhole can be very useful. So the pigeonhole of the letting specialist was very useful to achieve growth to a certain point, but then it's dangerous because if the market changes around you and you're in a pigeonhole and you can't move, then, you know, that may have a detrimental impact on how you grow in the future. And so we, you know, not long after we listed in 2012, I remember talking to the board, the people I was working with, including Mike Goddard, who was still on the board at that time, and we sort of debated whether to get involved in a state agency, and I'm very glad we did, for lots of reasons. It enables us to give a full service to our clients. You know, landlords who want to join at the beginning and buy a buy-to-let property, they can, and then we manage their property, and then we can help them exit at the end, so we can look after all parts of it, and now we can help them raise funds for further purchases or remortgages by means of Mortgage Advice Bureau. So we've kind of got that full circle approach, and that really was our intention back in 2012. So yeah, if anything, if you said what's the biggest change, it's probably all of us, including the franchisees, being brave enough to climb out of our pigeonhole, drop the specialist. Some franchisees still use the letting specialist if they're not involved in a state agency, but the vast majority don't. You know, we're no longer viewed as just a letting specialist.
And that's nice because, of course, you haven't got a glass ceiling as well on that element of the business, have you? And so, look, just for anybody watching this in the future, just to place the time date stamp it, we're here in the third lockdown, just looking to get out of it, and we're all very excited about that. But what do you see as the biggest kind of business challenge or challenges at the moment?
You know, I don't really see that there are, aside from COVID, which I think, you know, if we ask the question to our franchisees, what's your biggest challenge at the minute? I think the majority of them would say it's COVID. You know, if you're a lettings business, it isn't just the fact of dealing with the COVID secure guidelines that retailers have to deal with. It's the challenges with possession, it's the challenges with arrears, possibly, you know, if your arrears have climbed because of COVID. And in fact, our arrears are very low. Our arrears are less than 4%. So we normally run at less than 2%. So arrears have risen because of COVID.
Yeah.
certainly haven't risen to the.
Not what was touted as might be an issue.
I at the first lockdown, Simon, people were saying to me that arrears are going to rise to 50 to 70%. I'm a landlord. You know, that's enough to put you off your dinner, isn't it, when you think about arrears being that level? But that was just simply pie in the sky. So that the reality is sort of sub 4%. So my point being that the biggest challenge at the minute is actually still COVID, I feel, in the short term. On the estate agency side, again, COVID is distorting the market. So stamp duty holidays, not the first time buyers incentive, but mainly the stamp duty holiday, the fact we're having lockdowns, then we're having pent up demand. All of these things are distorting the market that we operate in. And you know, if I know one thing about business people, they like to be able to predict what comes next.
Yes, so the classic one there is, whilst every agent I've ever known bemoans seasonality, there's a wonderful crutch, isn't there? Knowing, well, this is.
They secretly love it. Yeah. We all secretly love it, and you know, it's that comfort element. And you know, when you're running a business, you've got to make decisions on bank borrowing, on paying staff higher salaries, taking on new suppliers, moving shops, you know, whatever it might be. And so you've got to have a bit of an insight into what's coming next in your sector. I think COVID just took away that predictability. And you know, when I think back to, I think we're almost today, I think it's almost dead on 12 months, isn't it, since we sort of had to move businesses and started working from home. And I shan't forget that feeling. It was like, you know, if you're the captain of your own ship and running a business, that was like the feeling of fog descending, and you couldn't see
it felt very calm.
You couldn't see your hand in front of your face, no. So you had to make decisions on the fly.
But what I loved about it, Dorian, and as you know, as I said, as somebody who's been lucky enough to kind of hold on to the coattails of, as everyone always tells me, is the adaptability of the industry. I mean, whatever this industry is, you know, whether it's 2008 or COVID or anything else, there was a period of a week or two, you know, where literally everybody was in, well, what do we do? But then, you know, and it still took a while for a lot of people, but some people came out, rolled up their sleeves, and they literally created a market, didn't they, where none existed.
And I also think it showed up the differences between agile businesses and businesses that were inflexible. So you know, the best illustration of that was probably the first lockdown. I think we all expected to be locked down longer than 2 months. You know, we thought when I first heard that the lockdown was being lifted, one, it was a complete surprise. Secondly, I thought, crikey, are they unlocking estate agents? It's like it's back to the song. They're going to send us over the top.
You're the first out,
We're all still standing in kind of, you know, 2 months' time. But then what the sort of third thought was, okay, so if it is being lifted, we've got to move really quickly. And I'm not kidding. This is, again, one of the joys of franchising. You couldn't hold our franchisees back.
Yes, they're ready to go.
We'd have been running a corporate estate agency. I suspect that a lot of the branch managers wouldn't have been willing to go back. Maybe some of the staff would have been reluctant.
Well, Dorian, you famously heard, didn't you, that some corporates seemingly, even though everyone else had returned, is their offices seemed closed, locked up, and there was no activity there. So the independence, or dare I say, you know, obviously the franchise
straight open. Yeah.
And that's got to be noticed, and indeed it was noticed. I mean, I was talking to the guys from 20EA the other day, and they were looking at the stats from last year, and they were showing how the SME businesses coped against, you know, those corporates in terms of their, and obviously they did manage to bounce back quicker, because it took, go back to your early point, took a while for the corporates to change direction, didn't it?
And it could have been COVID secure stuff, you know, that's one part of it.
Yes.
Got to do it collectively, which in many ways, you know, it was easy to do it individually, wasn't it, just to get out there and get it done. But also the fact that the independent businesses, not just franchise, but franchise and independent businesses, got open so quickly, it meant they had a chance to grab instructions, they had a chance to deal with pent up demand. So actually, there were streets ahead when it came to the sort of stamp duty, the tax break. The independents and franchises had stock to be able to offer this cohort of sort of new buyers when they emerged from lockdown. So yeah, interesting stuff. So I think we've all learned a lot over the last 12 months. I think with better businesses as a result.
Do you think so? Do you think there's almost
I think so.
change there? We're going to. I mean, I understandably would think so. It's hastened the change, hasn't it? Some technology and practices that ordinarily probably would have taken 3 years, maybe longer, and it's brought all that into play now, hasn't it?
Definitely, I think we are. I think we're all better businesses generally as a result. But if you'd have said that to me 12 months ago, you know, I'd have looked at you like you were some sort of alien, really, and said, "Come on." You know,
I get that a lot.
We just didn't know what was coming. Actually, I think we were thinking 12 months ago it was about survival, wasn't it?
It was.
Whereas now it's about operating in a new environment, either with or without COVID, which is still yet to be seen.
And what did you have to communicate? Because it's funny, as we're talking about, obviously, when we came out of that in May, June, whatever it was, and people were like, "Oh God, is there going to be a market to return to?" And luckily there was. So there was never the potential for that negative reinforcement and tailspin. But actually, then what started happening was people started. Okay, they reset their targets, their budgets, and everything else. And then as they got towards autumn and the later part of the year, they realised actually we're not just beating those re-evaluated ones. Some of those businesses were beating their targets from the start of the year before pre-COVID. So, were you? Did you? What was the approach you had to take with your franchisees? Because you can't be too happy clappy, and you can't be too maudlin, can you? It has to be a really quite measured feedback you give to those people.
You know, I think as in terms of a trading style, I think we're just quite factual. Simon, I think is probably so we tend to retreat back on the sort of facts and the figures, and we sort of pumped a lot of information out to franchisees during those 2 months. In fact, more than we've ever produced. Part of that was because things were changing so quickly, so we had to get information out quick, and the franchisees seemed to, be pretty happy with the approach, during those 2 months. But yeah, it was just a very, difficult sort of unpredictable time, really. But I think it shows that the other thing that it has sort of demonstrated is that if you look back at businesses, when you look back at 2020, if businesses performed very well in the first half of last year, so estate agency businesses, they're, in my opinion, the strongest ones. If they performed well in the second half of the year, you can put a lot of that down to pent-up demand, stamp duty holiday, sort of riding the wave. And we did come out and we said early, it was in October we first said it. The first half of last year, we performed better than our pre-COVID forecast, which was good. Part of it due to previous acquisitions, though it was due to previous work that we'd done. But I'm glad that's hopefully now that we're getting to the point where we can almost put it behind us, but
almost normality. There you go. And you mentioned it earlier there in terms of as well, just mentioned the suppliers point. Of course, my ears went like that. If you can see it through this kind of lockdown haircut. What's your view on suppliers? Which suppliers do you feel add real value to the industry at the moment?
I suppose without being specific, really, because there are so many good suppliers. I actually think that in a way, all of the suppliers sort of add something, and how we operate as a business with our franchisees is that we give, rightly or wrongly, we give franchisees a lot of flexibility over which suppliers they use. So, and let me compare that to another franchise model. So if you're a McDonald's franchisee, you don't have the choice between making straight or curly fries.
Totally regimented, isn't it?
Exactly right. So to the second, so food is cooked literally to the second. You can't source your own ingredients. So imagine that. Imagine a franchisee in McDonald's, sourcing their own potatoes and lettuce. And
a pineapple burger or something like that. Yeah.
That might be why they won't sell you a franchise, actually, Simon.
Yeah,
but they just don't have any flexibility over which suppliers they use. Within our model, franchisees are flexible and they can use, they've got the flexibility to use not almost every supplier. So if it's a regulated practice such as mortgages or insurance products, that's locked down.
Yeah.
But if it's non-regulated, they can pretty much choose from almost whole of market unless we've had a bad experience with a supplier. Some suppliers give us better deals than other suppliers, therefore they're more attractive. And some suppliers look at a franchise network and give us discounts for scale. Others don't, because we're that quasi sort of business that isn't a corporate and isn't an independent.
Understand.
That's that sort of middle point. And then going forward, I think there have been so many tech companies sort of hit the graveyard, Simon, if I hear this is the next best thing one more time in property, you know,
I'll try not to say it. Yeah,
I've heard it once. I've heard it a million times. And
disruptional. That's the famous one, isn't it? So, and they've moved that into pivot now. So it's now the new pivot there. So, is there any? Just talking about that, are there any businesses at the moment, I suppose, that catching your eye on what's coming on the horizon, or?
You know, I think the portal battle is probably about to start raging, isn't it? With Boomin, you know, entering.
It got really boring, hadn't it? Really, again, isn't it funny how things just, there seems to be absolutely, you know, the CRM space seems really boring, and then, you know, up jumps Spectre from Street from Spectre, and all these other ones, these Australian companies come in, and as you said, there didn't look to be much happening in portals at all, did it? And all of a sudden, as we said, so you're keeping an eye on the likes of Booming, then I take it.
You know, I actually think and I tend to avoid the politics of stuff, Simon, not because I don't understand it. You know, I do, and I follow it, but I tend just to stay out of generally the sort of political side, because I think if you're running a business, you can't let your emotions run away with you, and this is only my personal sort of view. So you've got to make a judgment based on whether that portal or whether that supplier brings benefits to you.
Yeah.
What's happened in the past, I think, is the past, and I think the personalities shouldn't play any part in the sort of decision either. So, but I think the general premise of having more competition in the portal space, I don't see how that can't be good for agents.
Yeah.
So if you completely depersonalise it and take the emotions out of it, you know, if let's say there was a portal battle between 10 equal portals, the charges to agents would come thundering down. You know,
and you'd expect innovation to be a key result of that as well. And yeah, that's really interesting.
It is, and that's just sort of market forces really. And you know, if you said, Dorian, what do you think will sort of happen? I think the new portals will stand and fall on whether it's nothing to do with agents almost. It's whether they can get their brand in front of enough consumers and get the consumer traffic going so they can offer value to agents. Whether that happens with Boomin or not, I think is yet to be seen. But
that'll be judged by the public, not the agents per se, won't it? Yeah.
But I think we have spoken before on sort of my attitude to startups. I actually wish everyone luck when they're starting a business, and I genuinely do. You know, people put their heart and soul into businesses, they put their cash behind it, and I'd like to see them all succeed, really, if I could.
You're getting into my Corbyn world of sort of you know, free unicorns and everything else. Dorian, what would you say? What would you say is your proudest achievement to date in the industry? Obviously, there's loads more to come, but what to date? What do you think it is?
Interesting one. I'm not even sure I've got sort of one proud moment really, Simon. I think when we've grown for the last 24 years, both profit and turnover. So actually having that strap line is probably a proud moment. One of these days I'm going to lose that strap line, so I won't be able to say anymore, because you know you can actually increase your profits without growing your turnover for a start, you know, by cutting costs. So I know I may not be able to use that forever, but you know, while I've got it, I'm really proud of that.
And especially in the light of the last year, you know, I mean, if ever, you know, there's one to throw a barrier against that, yeah, that is absolutely incredible. Actually.
Well, and to some people that might seem like, you know, it's a sort of bit of a cheesy strap line, and maybe it is, but actually behind that strap line is blood, sweat, tears of, you know, a full management team, staff working, especially in the last 12 months, working extremely long hours. And trying to do our best for the franchise network, really. And I think
you mentioned there, you got a great. I'm lucky enough to know a lot of your team, and they really are top professionals. But what it sends to me there, though, is however you view that, is what you can't argue about is the consistency, is it? And that's, you know.
Definitely.
Look, I'm a sucker for awards, and you know, always love my Supplier of the Year awards, and they're lovely to get. But what I always made the point about is that actually, whether you win the overall one is less important than making sure that you are getting awarded year in, year out, because that's the thing that matters. And yours is, you know, forgetting even awards as trinkets. That's the mark of success, isn't it?
Well, I mean, again, one of my other cheesy sayings is that it's a marathon, it's not a sprint, and it absolutely is in business. You know, it's not about sprinting for the next 6 weeks. It's kind of how you sprint for the next 6 years, isn't it? That genuinely gives a business a future. But you know, you're a sort of good example, Simon, of, you know, you've started your own business. You own 100% of it. You're hugely passionate about it. That's the same with a franchise model. It's just that franchisees choose to take I wouldn't say an easier route, because I don't think self-employment is easy
No, it can't be, can it?
for anybody, whatever model you're using. But it's a slightly better trodden path than having to reinvent everything yourself every week that goes by. So just a different route.
There's just
Self-employment.
so many different spinning plates, isn't there? And so if you can actually take a lot of that off the table and focus on what we perceive as being the important things, then I can understand that entirely. So what have you you mentioned Harry Hill earlier, obviously a fantastic character, within the industry. Who are the people that you respect, either in the past or currently working? Who else is there that you feel really deserves applaud?
Yeah, crikey! I mean, because there are so many really. It's a small industry, but over the years there have been a lot of people pass through the industry. I mean, I think that definitely Mike Goddard, who founded Belfire, definitely he's no longer working, so he's fully retired, lives in Scotland. Mike's a great guy, and I had some real fun with Mike over the years. We sort of built.
He seemed like, I never knew the fella. I don't know if I ever met him actually, but he seemed a character. Would have been underplaying it, wouldn't it?
Mike was a sort of very wild, and still is a very sort of a true entrepreneur, Simon. So if when it came to roll of the dice, a lot of business people would worry about whether they roll the dice or not. By the time you'd stop worrying, Mike would have just thrown them, and that's it.
I need to catch up with him. That sounds very
great. It's brilliant, but then actually, by virtue of having an entrepreneur at the heart of the business, an entrepreneur has the capacity to cause complete chaos in a business as well.
Yeah,
you've got to have that balance of.
Because you can come up with idea after idea, but if you don't have the people ultimately to implement it and everything else, that's why I always say in our business they need two for every one of me, because an idea is volcano there, but if actually it can just become noise, can't it?
Definitely, and actually you can threaten your business long term, unless you need somebody looking at the 6 o'clock as well as somebody sort of looking at. So Mike, definitely one of them. I actually think I spent 5 years sitting on the board of the Property Ombudsman, which I really enjoyed. So the board of the Ombudsman, it's now restructured. So the format changed a few years ago. So I'm not part of that anymore. But Michael Stoop who is now our chairman. He joined us last year.
I always refer to Mike as aristocracy within this industry. Yeah, a lot of time for Mike.
He is me too. I mean, he's got 40 years experience. There isn't, and when COVID happened, actually having some experience on the board like that, someone who's seen the industry for the last 40 years, nothing phases them because they've seen similar stuff before. Obviously, we haven't seen COVID before, but we've had similar events before, and that's just brilliant. And actually, then I'd say that Bill McClintock, Jerry Fitzjohn, again, people who have worked tirelessly to improve standards in the sector. So I think the Ombudsman, so TPO, alongside Safe Agent and a whole bunch of other organisations have worked really well. So Isabel at Nowles have worked really well to sort of raise standards in the sector. I still think we've got a long way to go on that side. If you said, Dorian, what would you like to see happen in the next 5 years? ROPA being enacted would be the best thing, I think, for the sector and certainly for our business over and above anything else. Because in my heart, I kind of want to see that the public views, we want to be viewed as true professionals, and I'm not sure that the public views us in that way.
And that's an essential consequence of that needs to happen really for that to gradually seep into the public's consciousness, doesn't it?
Definitely, and that's got to include a qualification. It's got to include a regulator. It's got to include third party sort of dare I say auditing, but regulation in a proper sense. So we need all of that to be viewed as true professionals. And then back to what you said earlier on, if we're viewed as true professionals, maybe we can charge higher fees in the future.
Exactly, that's the route back to it, isn't it? Is by doing it. And we were talking off camera as well. Kate Faulkner's someone you respect as well, isn't it? In terms of the work. I mean, actually talking from a ROPA perspective, that professionalism and hard work has always come through from everything she does, isn't it?
I've got the greatest respect for Kate, and I hope you give her a nudge and ask her to watch this, Simon, because I genuinely have. I remember Kate. Kate sort of worked with us on and off for the last 12 or 13 years. So I remember Kate before she was involved in Buy to Let, just about. That was a long time ago now, and I think it's fair to say that she sort of learned as we've learned as a business. And I think she's done brilliantly to carve herself a niche in doing what she's doing. So anybody who works that hard and becomes that good, completely with under their own steam, so self-employed, definitely hat off.
They deserve it, don't they? That's good. And look, you mentioned, so let's just say I've given you your one wish. I'm Whaley the Magic Genie. Roper's done and dusted, so we're there. We're no longer, ages are no longer seen between politicians and bank managers. We're striding up the respectability charts. You've got 2 more wishes left, Dorian. What else would you wish for to kind of improve the industry?
I think once Roper's enacted, I think you've pretty much got a safe professional sector, if you like. So then, if we want to make more money, all of us, once the industry is safe, protected, regulated, we need a bigger sector. So we need more transactions, we need more buy-to-let properties, we need house building is probably the one.
So get back onto that again.
We need more business, if you like. And the more business will come from higher numbers of transactions. Now, there are a lot of things linked to that. You could say abolishing stamp duty would increase the number of transactions, but whatever measure it might be, my point is we need more transactions and we need vast house building. I've been I guess a bit of a lettings expert, if you like, for a long time. And when you're working in the letting sector, one area that you're always conscious of is that the private rented sector is housing people who actually shouldn't be in the private rented sector. They should be in social housing. Yeah. And that's caused all sorts of problems for the PRS over the last 10 years. And it's probably one of the main reasons why landlords have had a bit of an assault on them, again, over the last 5 years. So being house building, social housing, on the rental side also, and definitely on the home ownership side.
So it's basically just governments of whatever colour just deliver on the promises you keep making, don't they, in terms of the numbers that they need to build.
Definitely, without doubt. And I guess the third one, if I had one, is just the continued growth of franchising. Back to my real passion, really, which is franchising is, apart from property, franchising is at the heart of my sort of personal passion, and the continued growth and development of that. I think it's a great way for individuals to better themselves without having to climb a career ladder. And I think it's that the understanding of that still is, it still isn't well understood. So, but if it keeps growing at the rate it is growing, then I'll be a happy chap.
Well, I'll come back to you 5 years, and if all that's happened, it was all down to me. All right, Dorian. What would a modern day you say to a fresh-faced Dorian, 16 years old, Ned going into Countrywide? What would you say?
I think probably a couple of things, really. I think be clear about your goals is one of them. I frequently have this conversation with a nephew of mine over sort of, where again, quite cheesy, but, where do you see yourself in sort of 3 to 5 years? It's probably not the right question, but, what do you want to be and who do you want to be in sort of 5, 10, 20 years time? It's such a difficult question to answer.
Absolutely.
But if you can take the time to think about that, and come up with an answer, you've got a pretty good chance of being able to make a plan to get to that point. So I think being clear about your goals, definitely, and be fearless. Once you've defined your goals, whether it's personal goals or in business, ideally both, because they're, what it's like when you're running a business, Simon. The personal life and business is just it's so interlinked. You have to sort of prize them apart, don't you?
Don't cross the streams, as they say.
So you've got to define both, goals on both those sides. But once you define, just be fearless. So be brave, believe in yourself, and just go for it. I think I still think this country is a land of opportunity, and fingers crossed, the next 3 to 5 years, I think will present a lot of opportunities for businesses. And it would have done. I think these opportunities would be around now if it hadn't been for COVID. But maybe COVID was just a year out of our normal sort of lives, and then
hopefully just seen as a quick hiatus, wasn't it? As to say. So I can't believe I'm asking you this, but I am going to do it anyways. What's the one surefire thing to make you lose it? Can I answer and just say there doesn't seem like there would be much? You seem very you seem very calm.
You know, and you mentioned, you know, some of some of the people who work for me. I think no, I'm famed, Simon, for being generally unflappable. Not always unflappable, but generally unflappable, because I tend to think about things rather than just react to things. And I think by virtue of that, you're just a bit more measured, really, in your approach. And of course, I've been around for a long time, so the longer that you're around and the more experience that you get, the less flustered you get by sort of new things or changes or events. No, so there's nothing really I can think of. I mean, it used to be cigarettes, Simon, actually, as you well know. So, you know, I used to be a heavy smoker, but I gave up at the between lockdown 1 and lockdown 2. So I'm not a smoker anymore.
Oh, congratulations.
One of the reasons for that, after 30 years of smoking. So if I ran out of cigarettes, believe you me, I would.
That was it.
Yeah. In fact, when I got down to the last few, but now that's not a part of my life anymore. I'm not sure anything would sort of bother me particularly.
Okay, if you're pretty unflappable, like, what do you think people say about you? You know, when you're not in the room, what would you like to think they say about you?
I think hopefully sort of loyal and genuine. So I mean, I get stuff wrong like anybody gets stuff wrong, you know, especially in business where, you know, when you're running a business, it isn't like a book where you can sort of look at the contents page and think, you know what, I've just completed chapter 1. All I need to do now is flip to chapter 2 and it'll tell me what to do next. You know, we write our own destiny, don't we, if we're running it.
Yeah.
And therefore you're going to make some mistakes and get some stuff wrong. But I think loyal and genuine, hopefully that's what people would say. We run a good, straight business and very committed to the future success of the business, because so many people's livelihoods is connected to the business. We've got, you know, in terms of humans, we've got, I don't know, 2,500 humans in this business. That's a lot of people who depend on either me or a franchisee as their employer. Obviously not everyone works for me, a lot of people work for franchisees. But yeah, you know, that's a responsible position for both me to be in and the franchisees to be in. And yeah, we just want to see those people sort of grow and develop long term, because that in turn brings rewards to the business as well as the people in the business. And yeah.
And that seems to come through as well. I mean, I know you did. You put a lot of time into the charitable trust, the Prince's Trust, as well. What does that mean to you? That work that you do?
It's probably not a good time to talk about royalties. It's Simon.
Yes, actually, I was just thinking about. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm quite frightened now to say whether I'm a royalist or not. But anyway, no,
we don't have that many American viewers, so you're okay.
It's a good thing. So yeah, I mean, I've sort of been a volunteer for the Prince's Trust for the last 7 or 8 years. So I'm a business mentor, and I must say I really enjoy it. So and what the Prince's Trust is about really is giving people opportunities when they wouldn't have had an opportunity or may not have an opportunity.
We just didn't have the breaks.
So generally working with younger people who haven't got a career, maybe sure of what to do next. They may have a great business idea. So, you know, you said you're a volcano of ideas. A lot of young people are the same as well, but different to us. Whereas we can have an idea and we can transform that into a genuine business or a business initiative. A lot of young people have ideas, but they have no way of taking them forward. They can't borrow money from a bank. Their parents may not be in a position to help them. So the Prince's Trust provides grants for young people to start a business, and I've had some real successes. You know, lots of people sort of start off with the Prince's Trust and then get a job, which you might find is a success anyway. You know, at least they found a direction, but quite a few of them go on to run pretty substantial businesses. So yeah, I must admit, I love doing that. It's great.
That's fantastic, absolutely great. And one of the lesser known things I always like to throw one is, I believe you're a big Birds fan, but I'm not going to besmirch your name there. You love Birds of Prey, evidently. Is that right? Talk me.
You make me sound like some sort of crazy Twitcher, I think, Simon. So thanks for that. Do you know, actually, I love, so in terms of Birds of Prey, yeah, definitely. I mean, if I, not that I'm thinking of retiring, but if I ever did retire, I think probably what I would do is I'd get more involved in falconry. I love falconry.
Yeah.
So I'm not a falconer, because the definition of a falconer is someone who can go out with a bird of prey and bird hunts. That's a definition of a falconer. That's not what I do. But I'm pretty good with falconry. I love owls. Is the sort of so if you ever get a quiz night and you want to, you know, the subject is owls. I just think they're fabulous creatures, been around on this earth for a very long time, and there's a lot of good stuff about
Well, I'll
them.
tell you what, I'll equal it up. Little known fact is although you can't tell from my dusky looks, I was born in Kuwait and I grew up in Abu Dhabi. So we used to go out into, into the sand dunes, and when they'd have those displays, and they are absolutely incredible, aren't they? Creatures, and
absolutely,
you can feel the power in them when they're on your protective things on your arm. Yeah, incredible.
It's a huge skill as well. So I used to volunteer at. So how I learned falconry in the first place was I volunteered at a bird sanctuary. I was doing it on this is a good few years ago. It's 8-9 years ago. But on a Saturday morning, I was paying a gardener to do my own garden at home.
Yeah.
And I was going off to a bird of prey centre, and I was doing their garden for them with my equipment. So I'd drive down there on a Saturday morning, spend 4 hours. So before it opened to the public, I was the person doing the gardens. I was doing what I'm doing now. Yeah. But I did that in return for falconry training. So I did that, quid pro quo. I did something for them and they did something for me as well. That was the deal. I did that for 10 or 11 months until I got proficient with handling birds. So I'm keeping that though until I retire at some point. It's not a full-time job, but it's a full-time commitment if you want to keep birds. So
we'll know a bit more about you now then as well. And I'll just leave you with and thank you so much for your time today. Fascinating learning about you. As I said, I feel like I do understand much more about you. Obviously, we've known each other. We've never actually worked together. Obviously, it's probably why you look so relaxed. But you put on your page, and I encourage everybody to go on the influencers pages on Kerfuffle and see there's some fantastic, people like Dorian here. And your favourite quote was, actually, I'll ask you this in a second who it was from because I didn't know it. A reader lives 1,000 lives before he dies. The man who never reads lives only one. Do you know who it actually came from? Was it one of those?
No, I'm not sure, and I probably should know that really because that is one of my favourite quotes. I like a lot of quotes actually, but that's definitely one of my favourites. And that I think if you talk to my staff, I'm a huge reader. I know a lot of people actually read a lot of books. I think more so during lockdown as well. I think there's so much kind of knowledge locked up in books.
Well, you've wasted your time, really, haven't you? Well, I think the most terrible thing about this whole thing is if you haven't used this, and it's not right to say it's an opportunity, but if you genuinely haven't got rid of some of those things out, and learning via that would be one of them, you've missed a trick, really.
Do you know? I think we've lost something, Simon, really, with devices and with just the speed of news, that we get to hear all the sound bites of stuff that's going on. But actually, you're not reading the sort of 400-page book that explains the history and
the attention span. Certainly, I think
so there's no depth to understanding in some ways. So I think reading gives you a depth of understanding. Definitely, I don't just read non-fiction. I read fiction as well. So I particularly like ancient history. So you make me sound really dull now, Simon. So I sound like a bird watcher who reads all these books and stuff. So my share price will go down.
That's all down to me. Don't worry. We'll re-edit it in to get something really spicy in there. I'm a big Tom Holland fan actually on the history side of things. So we've got that in common. But look, thank you very much.
Tom Holland, as in Rubicon Tom Holland.
Yes, yeah.
There's a copy sitting just next to me.
His readings genuinely are. I mean, they read like fiction, don't they? But actually, this has all happened. Obviously, by definition, it's incredible.
I've met him at authors like that do author events. Simon, they're brilliant. So when COVID's gone, you can get along to an event. When you listen to someone reading their own book, whether it's fiction like non-fiction like Tom Holland or whoever, they are that passionate about it. It's worth it just to see how passionate they are about their own masterpiece. It's just great. I just love
being able to quiz them on it's fantastic. Well, look, Dorian, there we are. You've got to get a book out. It strikes me after with all of that. Chapter 12, Birds of Prey, and we'll take it from there. Dorian, I want to just say thank you once more again for spending so much time with us. It's been fascinating. Wish you all the very best, and obviously look forward to catching up with you in the future.
Simon, cheers. Good luck with Kerfuffle as well. So it's great what you're doing. So do you take care?
Thank you very much. Cheers, Dorian. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.